I'll show you how I took accessible materials like a storage tote or 2x4s and transformed them into a beautiful indoor hydroponic pond for awesome plants and unique fish using primarily simple techniques. This video is sponsored by Fritz Aquatics. I've built countless ponds both indoors and out. While the big ones outside are cool, bringing that type of nature indoors is equally as rewarding. I was getting plants the other day when I came across lemongrass. I thought to myself, you could grow this as a bog plant in an aquarium. Wait, no, a little pond would be even better, and you can make it for those fish you've wanted to work with for a long time. I wanted to keep this build as straightforward and inexpensive as possible. I just wasn't exactly sure what that looked like, so I paced around the store looking at various materials until I came across these 15-gallon storage totes. I liked the large footprint relative to the volume, plus the $12 price tag was pretty appealing. However, I couldn't say the same for its appearance. That's when I went from the blue store to the orange one and grabbed a 10-foot long 2x10 and 5 8-foot long 2x4s. I also needed some screws to assemble it, but I had some at home already. I assumed I'd need to get more materials later, but this was a good place to start. We're back at my house and it's time to get to work. Without the lid, this container is nearly 9 1/4 inches tall. That's the same as the 2x10. Trust me, I think it's kind of weird too, but all dimensional lumber like these and 2x4s have just gotten smaller over the years and are no longer a 2x10 or a 2x4. That was actually helpful here though. It's also helpful to remove a factory edge before cutting the boards. While that wouldn't have affected this project, they're rarely square and I always remove them out of habit. Also, a quick note on board selection. You'll rarely find a perfect board, but ones without a cup, bow, crook, or twist are ideal. These inconsistencies are easy to spot by squinting and looking down the end of a board. The ones I collected were decent enough. We gotta cut the boards to size. There are many ways to do that, of course. Some will prefer a classic approach, and others the assistance of modern conveniences. Whatever you choose is up to you. The dimensions for the 2x10 boards are right here, and I'll leave a complete list for everything down in the description. In the spirit of simplicity, it doesn't get much easier than a box around the tote. While I'd prefer to pre-drill and use pocket holes, I wanted to minimize the tools I used on this one, so the impact driver was my go-to. Plus, you can kind of get the same effect as a pocket hole by drilling the screw a bit, backing it out, and then using the hole to drive the screw at an angle. These old screws fought back throughout the project, but they worked out. However, I only did this in the front where I wanted the screws to be invisible. If you don't care about that, you could do all 4 corners like I did on the back. Since the boards are so tall, I used 4 screws in each corner. Just like that, the box that will conceal the tote was complete. We're not stopping there though. Looking at the underside, you can see where it needs support in the corners and middle. That's where the 2x4s came in. I wanted to cut as few pieces as possible, so I considered how to support the tote and create a stand simultaneously. I did that using 2 horizontal boards with 5 bracing boards in the middle. I attached the first 2 boards to the underside of the box on the middle of the sides with 3 screws each. The horizontal boards would attach to these, but first I added a 45-degree detail in the corners. Like before, I angled the screws in the front so they'd remain hidden, while the others went directly through the boards. I then got a scrap of a 2x4 to determine where to cut a notch at the top of the legs with the trusty hand saw. I didn't have to do this, but it would add some strength, and I thought that having them inset from the 45-degree detail would look more appealing. The other 3 braces would add rigidity. I screwed the side boards to the legs and the middle one as before. I also installed a brace between the pair of legs to square things up. Each leg also got an exterior load-bearing board. These are what carry the weight of the tote under the horizontal supports. I stabilized everything with an H support as well. Finally, I cut 4 angled boards to create the top frame. And that's the last of the boards we gotta cut. I have the measurements for all the 2x4s right here. Before I could attach those, I had to apply a finish. While there are many ways I could have done that, I settled on Shosugibon. I wanted a dark appearance. This was the fastest way to achieve those results. If I had used a stain or clear coat, I would have had to sand the entire surface for a while to get the best look. With this technique, all I had to do was char the exterior. That's not really a quick process either, but it takes less time than sanding and is actually more cost effective. Even so, all the exterior char had to be removed. Shout out to Alexander who recommended I try a scouring pad with this technique. Cheaper than sandpaper and honestly works awesome for this. This all went a really long way to transform the look of the piece. There were a few more details though. I wanted to be able to remove the tote if needed and simply put a screw in each corner. I also gave it a single coat of water-based polyurethane, which made the grain pop even more. I'm extremely pleased with how this turned out, but this is just the foundation for what's to come. For now, I have it here in the animal room and eventually plan to move it somewhere with natural light, but because of that, we're going to need something artificial in the meantime. I got these ring lights for that, which have built-in timers and telescopic poles. However, there was no way to mount them onto the pond. My solution here was simple, a few CPVC clamps. I measured for those and locked them in with some small screws. This was going to be a hydroponic setup and needed some air. I got things looking pretty seamless by sending the airline tube through this gap behind the container and down the back. All it needed then was an air stone, a check valve, and a mini USB pump. I wanted a net pot to go over top of the air stone for the plants, but it had to be elevated. This clay brick was perfect for that and provided a home for the air stone. It looked even better with the grass. I just had to get rid of that substrate on the roots though. I carefully removed what I could by hand. That wasn't going to be enough though. I had to soak them to loosen the rest. I also needed to clean some play sand too. It's always a slow process, but it pays off in the end to minimize excess debris. Yo, Play Sand Tanner here. I bet you thought I forgot about you. Well, I didn't, and I just wanted to pop in and remind you to like, comment, and subscribe to help support the channel because we're getting real close to 2 million. While at the Blue store before, I made sure to grab a bag of topsoil. I get a lot of questions about what soil I use in my tanks. Now you know. At less than $3 a bag, this stuff is dirt cheap, works exceptionally well, and I've been using it for many years. Here are a few designs I've used it in for reference. The only thing is that it's full of twigs and other large debris that need to be sifted out. I also like to mix in other things with it, such as gravel, aqua soil, or in this case sand. I had originally planned to put this directly in the pond and cap it with sand. However, I was concerned that the dirt would migrate under the brick and get thrown around by the air stone. Instead, I used these Fritz Super Sacks to isolate the dirt. The fine mesh on these media bags retains particles, making things more predictable because only the plant roots can access the contents. That's actually how I used the soil in the builds I mentioned before. Anyway, that meant it was ready for sand. And not as smooth as I had hoped. No big deal, I just evened it out with the sprayer. The plants are done soaking at this point and ready for another cleaning. I was able to spray off nearly everything with ease. That said, they're never going to be perfect, and a little bit of dirt here or there is no big deal. Now they were going to need a different type of substrate, leca. I also had these soaking so they wouldn't float away. I filled up most of the pot with them, nested the roots, and buried those. I was really excited when I saw this and immediately got to filling. I did that as slowly as possible to avoid disturbing anything. However, the basket unexpectedly began floating. I tried weighing it down, but that wasn't enough. It just wasn't stable. Thinking on my feet, I removed it and its contents. I knew I had some river rocks in storage that I could use to add weight. I stacked them on the side so the air stone could work as intended before putting everything back as it was. This helped a lot, but I could tell that some of the leca still wanted to float away. A few more rocks did the trick. I didn't really like how visible the edges of the pot were though, so I tried to hide them with salvinia. While they looked incredible, they weren't really good enough on their own. I figured I might as well try my luck with some driftwood. I'm glad I did because I didn't plan to do this, and they really complemented the grass well. Now, of course, these didn't completely hide the basket, but my hope is that they would anchor the salvinia to do a better job with that. The soil I added before was not for the plants you just saw, but for some aquatics like this rotala. I also added a dwarf aquarium lily and some banana plants. You know me, I couldn't help myself. I had to add some java moss along the edges too. And that's more or less the completed design. Now it's ready for fish. Introducing the mosquitofish. These tiny fish are live bearers who get their common name from one of their favorite prey items. I'm sure some of you are saying, why these boring gray guppy-like fish? Well, allow me to introduce the melanistic mosquitofish. It's the same fish, just with naturally occurring genetic differences that make them appear like a Dalmatian molly. Now that takes me back. Dalmatian mollies were one of the first fish I ever kept, so they have a special place with me, and I guess is a reason I was interested in these fish. I came across the regular ones at an LFS and had to get a group of them going immediately. This pond was an excellent opportunity for that. Let's see what they think of their new home. They were understandably unsure of their surroundings. I thought some snail friends might help them feel more at home. Since I didn't use any cycled materials, I also had to dose with Fritz Turbo Start nitrifying bacteria to ensure a safe environment for the animals even while being newly established. Then I let them settle in overnight. When I returned the next day, I noticed that the driftwood began leaching tannins, so the water wasn't quite as clear as before. The fish were still being shy, but I'm not surprised. It tends to take a little longer for pond fish to feel comfortable with your presence than aquarium fish because they can't see you from the side. I figured I'd try coaxing them out with Vitalis food. It's a high quality food because it's produced through a cold extrusion process. This locks in nutrients and delivers soft, easily digestible food. That also makes it possible to do stuff like this, mash it into larger clumps for community feeding, or break it into a dust for nanofish. It immediately piqued the interest of a few of the fish, but I had to get a closer look to see what they were really up to. Over the next half hour, it was a full-on feeding frenzy. While it was enjoyable to view the fish from this angle, it's going to take some time before they'll feel more comfortable with my presence near their little pond. I'm really pleased with how this turned out, and I'm excited to experiment with it some more. All things considered, I think it was a pretty straightforward build. It's also very versatile and easily scalable to suit other tote sizes. While mine is a hydroponic design, you could easily go the no-tech route or even run some bulkheads for a canister filter. I'll leave the rest to your imagination. If you're interested in other indoor pond solutions, I'll link up 2 different patio pond builds, one with running waterfalls and the other that's a no-filter option. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, Serpa Squad, take care and peace.